this wonderful webinar full of great information for us, Risk Management, Americans with Disabilities Act. We have the pleasure of having Nelson Locke as our speaker. We also have, I'm Linda Knowlton, your FAMP president, and we have also Orlando Diaz, who's currently our secretary on our executive committee. So we welcome everyone there and welcome everyone here that's attending. We are in the honor of Nelson Locke, who's been around this business, gosh, for a little while, and I'll let him tell you how long here in just a moment. He's also a past president of our state association of FAMP, but he has very much of a profile and a background in expert witnesses. He's also a licensed California attorney who's also admitted to other states, which of course is Florida, Colorado, Oklahoma, and Texas Federal District. He is an expert in the NMLS and SAFE Act licensing, FHA direct endorsement. He's an experienced expert witness, a HUD and FHA HECM reverse mortgage, HUD or FHA audit management. He's also experts in other areas that all are related to, of course, our field, which is the Dodd-Frank and the SAFE Act, the Federal Tort Claims Act, the HUD FHA audit compliance, mortgage banking, and the one we don't like to hear about very often is mortgage fraud. But today, Mr. Locke is going to talk about Americans with Disabilities Act, and of course, all that surrounds that. He's an extreme expert on this, has a lot of information, and hope it will be valuable information to you. So I am going to turn it over to Nelson Locke. Nelson?
Thank you, Linda, and hi, everybody. I'm glad that you could attend this today, and and it's a usual beautiful Texas day here. Some of you probably don't know I'm up in Dallas, but I was down there in Florida for 30 years and ran a company called Value Financial. And we did a lot of business with many of you, or possibly even some of your successors. But yes, listening to Linda read all that stuff off, I was trying to figure out who's she talking about. But that's what happens when you get old, is that it just keeps piling up, okay? And as long as you can get out there and keep mowing the hay like I can, you know, it just is going to go forever. I'm going to live forever. I'm telling you that right now. All right. Having said that, we're going to talk a little bit about the Americans with Disabilities Act and what we're going to. Oops, excuse me. I have a problem with a screen here in front of me that says this meeting is being recorded. Should I just click continue? Yes, there we go. Okay. We're going to talk about this because this is something that emerged about 3 or 4 years ago. And there are certain areas of liability for businesses, and especially those of us in mortgage brokering, lending, and real estate that attract attention of what I call predatory lawyers. I don't like to use that phrase, but I want you always to think of me as a business guy, a mortgage guy with a lot of years experience who just happened to have become a lawyer when he was 62 years old. So I got sick and tired of being beat around the bush, I guess you could say, by other lawyers. And I wanted to find out what it was they were really talking about. So I learned. All right. And that's been, in the last 7 years, we've had, a great amount of success working with Florida people. I think we probably have 75 to 100 Florida clients right now where we provide full service compliance. And nationwide, we have close to 300, and we're busy. We do a lot of work. One of the things that was happening was my clients were calling me and they were telling me, this started 3 or 4 years ago, hey, I just got a letter. I'm being sued because I'm not in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. And after this happened 3 or 4 times and I looked at the material, I began to understand that what was going on was there was a lawsuit mill. If you can think of it that way, that's all these lawyers did. There was an office in Washington, D.C., one in California, and one in Florida. And all these lawyers did was they would find somebody with a disability and they would ask that person to just go from mortgage company to mortgage company to mortgage company, checking their websites and see whether or not they were ADA compliant. We never thought about any of this, did we? I mean, this wasn't something we thought. When we thought about ADA, we thought about ramps coming in from the parking lot and handbars in the bathroom. And am I doing that right? I mean, that's pretty much what it meant. That's what it meant to us. A big screen TVs for people that had visual impairments in our office, that kind of stuff. And we usually thought about, when you think about ADA, people tend to think either it's all employee or all customer, but actually what it is it's a mix of responsibilities that business owners have to both employees and to their clients. Okay, well, these people that I talked about, these predatory lawyers, they were going after businesses, and they would take this sham plaintiff. A plaintiff is a person who brings a complaint, and they would draft this model lawsuit using his name on it, put your name on it as your company, send a copy of it to you, and scare the living bejesus out of you. And some of my clients actually, and I'll just say this rather stupidly, sent them money because they didn't have to send them money. Because the fact of the matter was, I had a way to stop it all, and it would have cost them maybe $100, maybe maximum $500. Not me, that's what the software costs. But the reality is you could make yourself compliant very inexpensively. And I like to get involved when these kinds of things happen with my clients. For example, if they got a letter like that, one of the first things I did was contact that law firm and tell them to take a hike. Just like that. Take a hike. You know, if you go any further, I'm going to report you for unethical conduct because of the way they were operating. So I'm telling you all that because I just want you to understand. We're going to talk about the mortgage business impact in a bit, but first I'm going to talk a little bit about how this affects people with employees, and you know, and that's really, I think, most of the major crux of it. All right, let's see if I can work this thing right. All right, here we go. Learning goals and objectives. Hey, I got to tell you where I got this from was this presentation came to me from my alma mater. My law school was bought by Purdue. And we're now part of Purdue University Global, and they had this on their website, and I thought, this is fantastic. So it's a short one so that we can get in and out of this in an hour, and it's really clear. I liked the way it was written. So that's why I decided to use it with you today. The idea here is to ensure that your employees and clients are treated with respect and dignity. Those two words are the key words here, respect and dignity, to create an environment free from disability-related discrimination and harassment. Now it says employees and clients, okay? I have a lawyer that works for me out of Brownsville, Texas. His name is Juan. He's a great guy. He's visually impaired. He's legally blind. And what I had to do with him when I brought him on board was I thought about it. I had to equip him with large screen monitors and the ability to blow just about any kind of document up to where the letters were, you know, maybe 2 inches tall, because that's what his vision required. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the way he thinks or the decisions that he arrives at. It's just that accessing information without the help of something that was disability friendly was difficult for him. So he's been with me now for 4 years, and he's a phenomenal part of our company. And I just want to tell you, that's like a success story of how you can deal with people that have disabilities. I am very respectful of him and treat him with a lot of dignity. And I'm trying to get him to move from Brownsville to Plano so he could be in the office every day. Anyway, what we're going to try to do is talk a little bit about how to better interact with individuals that have disabilities. I'm going to give you a basic understanding of the Americans with Disabilities Act. I'm going to give you some resources that employees and clients who may have a disability and need reasonable accommodations, where they can go and how they go about requesting accommodations. And then we're going to talk a little bit about policies on non-discrimination and equal opportunity. That's important because all of us in the mortgage industry, we have to deal frequently with issues like discrimination and disparate treatment, right? ECOA and the Fair Housing Act. And it would definitely be considered disparate treatment. And this was brought up in the lawsuits that I was seeing. It was definitely considered disparate treatment if you treated one class of customer differently than you treated other classes of customers. So you had to be able to level the playing field. And the way you leveled the playing field was by making your electronic media and office disabled person friendly. Okay, that's a crummy word, isn't it? I just made that up. Disability friendly. How about if we just say it that way? All right. Also, I want to point out, if you have any questions as we're going through this, just ask them. And Orlando will pop them up on the screen for me, and I'll take a look at them, okay? Because no, if I can answer them right away, I will. If they're inappropriate, I won't. So there you go. All right. Now let's talk about why is it important. Well, holy cow, look at this. Now, I think this is probably an understated estimate of disabled people in the country, where it says 20% of the total population, because I have a feeling, and this is just a feeling, I have no facts to support this, but I've got a son with ADHD, And I know many, many other people that have children in their family with learning disabilities and ADHD. And I don't even know if a lot of that comes out of the closet, if you know what I'm saying. So if it doesn't, if it's not something that where information is gathered and measured by the United States government, it wouldn't be in this 20% estimate. But I'll tell you what, just about every person in the gaming generation that I've met has some kind of issue with learning or attention deficit disorder. I think computers have brought that on us. So maybe this 20% is really 30. The point I'm trying to make is it's a big number. That's a lot of people. Okay, that's a million. That is what, 100 million people if you have 30% of the population? That's a lot of people. Okay, so here they say there's 133 million people in the US living with a chronic health condition. Now, a chronic health condition might not be a disability that would require you to make reasonable accommodations, but of those 133 million people, probably plenty of them do have a disability that would require you under this law to make reasonable accommodations. Now look at this. That number is expected to increase to 150 million by 2030. Well, I guess our population is going to continue to rise, and that's probably statistically solid. So it's a big number, a lot of people. Now, attitudes. Why is this training important? This is a big one. Attitudes and stereotypes are the main barriers to successful employment reported by people with disabilities. There is still a bias and a disrespect sometimes and a fear and disparate treatment that these people have to deal with in their daily life. And there's more of it probably than we know. And why do I say that? Because people don't report. Okay. And I think that's what you have to think about. All right. So what did this tell us? Big numbers, right? Big numbers. All right. So now, hey, is my sound okay? Orlando, shake your head. I'm good? All right. Thank you. So what is the idea of people first? If you think about Americans with Disabilities Act, the concept of people first is why the ADA was created. Treat adults as adults, whether employees or clients. This next one I really like, use people first language. In other words, talking directly to them and not around them or over them. How about have any of you had the experience where you were dealing with a customer or an employee who was hard of hearing and you find yourself speaking to the person next to them and shouting? It's a weird thing that humans do, but we tend to maybe unconsciously avoid direct interaction with people that have disabilities. That's especially true if there are physical disabilities that aren't pleasant to look at, which is unfortunate for that person. And I think in our particular case, as a human being, I think we tend to avoid things that aren't pleasant to look at. So at any rate, this talks about using eye contact, speaking directly. I just talked about that. And then it says here, though, if you offer assistance, wait until the offer is accepted. What that means is that if you offer assistance and you make it too urgent of a request that you help, you may, in fact, make that person extremely uncomfortable because they don't like attention called to their disability. And if they're your employee, that would be construed to be a hostile work environment if they made a complaint. The regulators would call that hostile. Okay, that's a word they use. They throw that around a lot. If it was a customer, what'll happen is your customer will get up and leave. All right. So if you offer to help somebody, give them a chance to respond. Be considerate of the extra time it takes to take a person with a disability to perform a major life activity. I had a client recently who had had a stroke, and I was trying to gather some information from them to help them with a life problem. And they were speaking so slowly, and it was so hard to understand that as I went through that experience with him, I thought to myself, in the back of my mind, I'm a human being, I'm going, oh my God, how long is this going to take? But that was the wrong kind of thought to have. I should have looked at the disability, put the person first, thought about the respect that I should have treated them with, and given them as much time and help as they needed to get their thoughts out to me. Okay, but we all are learning all the time. And that experience I'm sharing with you was one where I learned. Okay. It says here, oh my gosh, I just said this. Everyone makes mistakes from time to time. If you make a mistake and offend somebody, just simply say, I'm sorry. And I'm going to do better. Don't make assumptions. Everybody with a disability is going to more than likely have a different take on what they consider to be fair treatment. And that depends really on where they're coming from. Okay. If it's a client, you're going to have to be really careful. If it's an employee, this gets a little easier because you work with them every day and you learn what they expect from their coworkers as it relates to the disability they may have. And always remember, if there's a person that you're dealing with that is disabled and you're not sure how to interact because maybe you're not sure they can see well enough, or maybe you're not sure they can hear you properly, or they may be uncomfortable sitting and they need to stand, or I could go on. Just remember, it's okay to ask questions and let them tell you what they prefer. That's the best. It's always good to say, hey, what would you like? Listen, that's the way to be. Okay. All right. Now, the reason I'm going through these fairly quickly is because this really puts a large focus on employees. And I think most business owners that I've worked with in Florida in particular really have a pretty good grip on this. Where we in the mortgage industry are getting in trouble is where the clients are concerned. And so that's why I want to get to that slide so we can talk about that at length. But what happens if you're complying with the ADA? Let's say you're really thinking about this people first and respect idea. Well, it protects individuals from being discriminated on because you're treating them fairly and giving them every opportunity to let you help them perform at their highest capability with whatever it is they need. So the ADA, it's like the disability police, I guess. I talk about that sometimes when I do AML. I talk about FinCEN. I call them the mortgage police. Well, think of the ADA as the disability police. This is a really important bill. One particular concept of this law, it's something you got to get a good grip on. This is one of those strict liability type situations. So what that means is if you violate this act, it's really not going to matter to a regulator if you really didn't mean to, or you accidentally did it, or whatever. This is like strict liability in the law. Strict liability, like if you buy a product and it's defective and it injures somebody, well, then the manufacturer is going to pay. It doesn't matter how the person got injured, the product was defective. Well, here, if you treat somebody with disparate treatment or discrimination based on the disability, or notice it even says perceived disability, that kind of goes to what's going on in the mind of the person who you're dealing with, right? Whenever you see something like that, you need to always know that you really have to be on your total best behavior, because what this means is it's in the eye of the other person, not in the mind of them, not you. So what you care about doesn't matter. It's what they think. Okay? Now, the ADA also requires employers to provide reasonable accommodations. That's a very important point. And I think we've got a slide here that's going to deal with how to do that. But one of the key things you should take away from this as the company is that if you have disabled employees, it's not going to be much of an issue with clients. It's going to be more of an issue with your employees. If they have a problem and they need help to be able to do their job better and it's disability related, you have to provide reasonable accommodations. What does reasonable mean? That's the key word. Okay, this is a word that is so broad that you could drive a truck through it, right? It's written in the law that way on purpose because they want you to do basically whatever you can to accommodate qualified individuals. Now, we got a couple of examples we'll show in a few minutes. So you'll see it isn't every single time somebody asks, you've got to do it. Well, I think about my son who's got this beard. He looks like he came from Indiana and he should be, on an Amish farm. I don't know what was going on in his head when he grew this thing, but he's got a big, long beard that I hate. And if he came to me, I said to him, I says, how does your boss deal with this? And he says, well, they can't argue about it. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, it's my religion. Well, see, you could just substitute, I have a skin disability and therefore I can't shave. And how deep could I question it? How far would I be able to go? Doctor's reports or whatever? Give him special medical capabilities in the company restroom? I don't know. There's just something reasonable, which would probably be do nothing and let him take care of it on his own, but not hassle him about it. Okay. And then the ADA also says that you can't drill down hard on employees or on customers about their disabilities. You really have to keep your inquiries reasonable as well. All righty. Who's a person with a disability? Arguably, I am. Arguably, probably Orlando's got one or two. Here's the deal. This is broadly interpreted. Okay. Do I have a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits life activities? My daughter's over here about 5 feet away from me, shaking her head. Yes. Okay. So, I mean, that's what she thinks. But the idea here is that when somebody says they have an impairment, it's the impairment's impact on the major life activity without regard to mitigating measures. Okay, so what does that mean? That means you take them as they are. If they're on medical treatment or have medication or assistive devices, that's nice, but they're still impaired and they still have a substantial limitation placed on many different types of major life activities. Okay, to determine if they have a disability, this is like the three-pronged test, what you see on the screen here. The first one is that it substantially impacts their life somehow. The second part, now here's a good one, and this is where my son with his beard, this is where it would fail. They have to have a record of such an impairment. In other words, he never went to the doctor and had the doctor say you can't shave because your skin breaks out. There's no history, okay? So if a person is disabled and has regular medical care, that's the type of record that the law looks for. And there's another reason here, though, and this is one that's really very vague. If they're regarded as having such an impairment, wow, that's kind of broad, isn't it? Yeah, that could be interpreted in any number of ways. I guess if the person thinks they're impaired and there's a record of an impairment and their parents think they're impaired, well, then they're impaired. I think that's what this means. So you err on the side of caution and treat them with respect and as a person, not an object with a disability. Okay. Oh, here's some examples. Let's see how many of these I can tick off for me. Okay, we have autism, no question. Cancer, no question. Diabetes, got it. Okay, and it is a problem. If I don't eat right, I end up either getting kind of comatose or getting kind of manic. I don't know if any of you have got diabetes, but it's kind of nasty. Okay, deafness. Well, I have a hearing impairment, but it's due to Harley Davidson's, but it still affects me. Okay, too many years on too many motorcycles. I know a lot of people that served in the Marine Corps that have got high degrees of deafness, and it's from all the rifle fire and all the explosive devices they were around. Blindness. I used the example of my junior lawyer Juan. Cerebral palsy. I never understood much about this, but I saw somebody the other night on America's Got Talent. Any of you guys watch that show? And he was up there doing stand-up comedy and he had cerebral palsy and he did a great job. But I worried about it all the time I was watching him because I thought he might fall. Very difficult, very difficult. And if he worked for me or he was a customer, I'd have to take extra steps to make sure he was safe. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a big one that you can't see in a lot of people until it's too late. And that is a mental impairment. And the reason it's on this list of qualifying is because of, the world's longest war, Afghanistan, the people that fought in Vietnam, and what went on in Iraq. I have a very good friend named Rick, who is 73 years old and was an Army grunt, which means infantryman in Vietnam. And his hand shakes all the time. And if there's any loud noise around him, he jumps up out of the chair and has fallen down right in front of me. out of fear, and it's just like a muscle training reaction. 50 years after Vietnam, after he came home from Vietnam. Well, that's a good example of a qualifying physical or mental impairment. And the accommodation I give Rick is I don't make any noise when I'm around him. I'm very quiet. And if he's walking somewhere, I try to walk next to him and make sure that he's not going to fall because something startles him and causes that kind of a reaction. But that's a good example. Obsessive compulsive disorder. Wow, boy, I didn't know that was on the list. Hey, Samantha, we can talk to your mom about this. Anyway, don't anybody tell her I said that, okay? Obsessive compulsive disorder, though, it is something that causes somebody's life activities to be affected. I mean, just stop and think about it. People that make endless notes, tiny little letters, stack things in a straight line. If you had an employee like that and they had obsessive compulsive disorder, they may end up actually spending more time organizing themselves than they actually did working. And you would have to make a decision, you know, how am I going to deal with this? What do I do with this? Well, the ADA says you're going to accommodate them if they ask. Okay.
Nelson,
Go ahead.
since you mentioned accommodating, we do have one question
Sure.
from Tom. It says, "What are your thoughts about medical marijuana in the workplace?"
Well, there's an opinion and then there's a legal opinion. Okay. An opinion and a legal opinion. And my personal opinion has no place here. But my legal opinion is that if the state makes it legal and the federal government allows to continue to stand down on the use of medical marijuana, well, then I don't know how you can stop it. I have clients out in California that are medical marijuana growers and dispensaries. And my take on that is that it has a very, very important role in helping many people, but it is abused. And if you can look at statistics in Colorado, where this became legal a few years ago, and there has been a significant uptick in the cost of correcting problems caused by people who used marijuana on the job. And there has been liability. There have been liability issues. So I can't, that's a touchy one, Orlando, but I think that gives you the general idea.
Thank you.
Where is Florida? Where is Florida on medical marijuana? Have they approved it yet?
Yes, it's medical marijuana is approved, but it's still medical, recreational, still not
Okay.
allowed. And then obviously we have, the conflict with federal law. So
Right.
it's still sticky.
Yeah, it is, and it's going to be sticky. I think with our current president, my feeling is this may end up the federal part of this may go away, but that's not going to necessarily do away with the risk management part for employers. If you stop and think about, if you think about marijuana and you think about alcohol, what's really the difference if a person's using one or the other? And maybe one's with a prescription, one's without, but if they're on the job and impaired, okay, that's going to cause harm to somebody. So that's just something to think about. Good question. Mobility impairments. All right, well, that's simple. Wheelchairs, walkers, that kind of thing. Intellectual disabilities. I don't know how that affects us in the mortgage industry, but it could. There could be somebody that was not capable of being an MLO, but might be capable of some other job within the company. And that's an example of where if you had somebody you hired and you were told after the fact that they had an intellectual disability, then maybe what you do is the accommodation is a different job within the company. Epilepsy, that's a hard one to deal with. HIV/AIDS is sort of not current news, but it's on this prepared presentation. I don't think that's been much of an issue in recent years in places that I have as clients. Bipolar disorder is a biggie. That's a biggie. And the hardest part about bipolar disorder is getting people to admit they've got it and that they need help. Because bipolar individuals typically take medication to put themselves into a happy place. And by that, I don't mean an impaired place, but I mean a middle ground between manic and depressive. and then they feel good. So the first thing they do is stop taking the drugs. And that's where the problem becomes. So if you had a person with that type of an impairment, your accommodation would be to allow them uh, to be in a quiet, more controlled, more predictable sort of an environment, if there can be such a thing in the mortgage industry. But also, you'd have to tell them as part of your rules of conduct that they need to follow their doctor's instructions and stay on their meds because you have risk as an employer if they go off their meds and do something stupid. I had this happen to me a few years ago. It wasn't pleasant. Okay. I didn't have it, somebody else did. All right. Major depression. Yeah, that's easy to tell. With depression, the accommodation is to try to make the work experience probably as pleasant as you can, while being sure that people are getting the help they need from medical professionals. We've all seen those commercials with the women and men that carry around the little hand sign that has a smiley face on it. We've seen those on TV. That's kind of how I feel it is with people with depression. Lots of times you don't even know they are suffering from it until it's too late. MS is similar to cerebral palsy. In my thinking, so is muscular dystrophy. Those are actually diseases that result in disabilities. Okay, it's a pretty impressive list, isn't it? A qualified individual for you, when you think about your employees, this is employees, not customers, is an individual who meets the skill, experience, and education requirement of the job. And then there's an and here. It's not and or. Connectors are important. This says and, so this is a two-part requirement. They can perform the essential functions or basic duties of a job with or without a reasonable accommodation. Now, the lawyer in me says, what the hell does that mean? And I mean, most of you don't have legal training, and you're thinking, well, how can I interpret this stuff? Well, see, what this says to me is it says that that they have to be able to work whether or not you accommodate them. And I know that's not the intention of the ADA. So it could very well be that this particular statement here needs a little research. I think I'm going to look into it. I'm sorry, this is the first time this presentation's been given. I think the thing to remember is meets the skill, experience, and education requirements of the position and can perform essential functions or basic duties of a job. You could make yourself absolutely safe if you just said, if they were disabled, with a reasonable accommodation, because I believe that's the intent of the ADA. All righty. Now, what is a reasonable accommodation? I kind of talked about that a little bit. Let's take a look. It's any modification or adjustment to a job, practice, policy, or the environment that they work in that allows an individual to participate equally in an employment opportunity. Your accommodation is supposed to erase their deficit. Follow what I'm saying there? It's kind of like the accommodation erases the deficit and puts everybody on a level playing field. That way, you've got essentially with the accommodation, you have the same policies and procedures for everybody. Examples include making existing facilities accessible. Okay, ramps, special bathrooms, wide doorways, things that open doors automatically, low light switches for people that are wheelchair bound, and so on and so forth. Modifying a work schedule. Well, you might have a person who has a vision impairment who doesn't want to be out when it starts to get dark. So maybe you change their work from 9 to 6 in the winter to 9 to 4, so they can get home without any problems. Altering training material. Well, that's pretty simple. If you have visually impaired people, you blow it up. If you have auditory issues, you play it loudly, or play it loudly with at the same time having a screen present and maybe even somebody who can do sign language. Okay. Acquiring or modifying equipment, providing an interpreter. Well, that's a little tough when it comes to employees, because I'm not so sure we would hire people that didn't speak whatever language we operated our business in. Is that a safe assumption? Yeah, but I think we can probably also say that there's a law firm out there that would say, I know she can only speak Lithuanian, but you've got to give her an equal shot at the job. So I don't know. I don't know. Restructuring a job so that it works around a disability and allows the person to be productive. Giving them leave without pay if in fact they've had some kind of a serious event, such as maybe a real bad bipolar or manic depressive event that requires them to rest and be quiet for a while to get, you don't say, well, you got to be to work on Tuesday. Yeah, I hope you're okay because you got to be here. Well, if they can't be there and they have a disability and you know it, that would be an example of not being reasonable. Reassignment to a vacant position. Wow, that's interesting. I don't know what to say about that, so we'll skip it. I'm going to remove that from the next time I do this. Okay, so the ADA requires employers to provide accommodations to qualified individuals with disabilities. All right, we already know that. I've said it 100 times. Reasonable accommodations, not all accommodations. Okay, effective accommodations, not preferred accommodations. What does that mean? It means that the person with with a disability may ask for something that you don't think is really going to help them do their job. So you come up with a way to make the accommodation more effective so that they can continue to do their job and do a better job of it. And now listen to this one. This is something that I think is important. I think that if you fired somebody with a disability, you could end up with a situation where you probably will have a lawyer calling you. But this says clearly, and this is right out of the ADA, the accommodation must not pose an undue hardship to the employer. So if you just can't do it, I guess you don't have to. Okay? If you just can't do it. But that would be a situation that would require some real diplomacy with the person that was going to be affected. Because I believe most accommodations can be made. It's the magic. It's the employee's responsibility to make the request. You don't have to go to them and seek them out. And they don't have to do it in any particular way or say something unique, like, sir, yes, sir, or something like that. They can put it in any form of communication they want as long as they ask. That's important. All right. So what happens? How do you request accommodations to be in compliance with the ADA? Your employee contacts their manager and asks for help. And notice here it says medical information isn't shared with the supervisor at any time. You all know this whole HIPAA concept, right? The HIPAA laws about medical privacy, and it's really like the medical version of the Gramm-Leach-Wiley Act, and it's very important, okay? So what this basically means is if there has to be any kind of medical documentation, it doesn't come through the supervisor, the manager, or the company president gets it, and he has to keep it confidential. Now, what could he do? With an employee's permission, with their informed written consent, he could inquire from their doctor about the disability and ask the doctor for the doctor's advice. But he can't share that with anybody. Okay, so he can't give it to the supervisor and say, here, take care of this. The top dog in the company or the manager in charge of that individual, and I think in our industry, that's mostly the president. I think it probably is, or the compliance officer if the company's larger. But that person's got to understand that this is a real confidentiality risk here, and you've got to keep it quiet. And you have to have informed written consent. Okay. So the manager gets that information and he can then determine, interpreting the information he got maybe from the doctor, whether the employee is qualified with a disability. Remember the 3 tests we had a little while ago? Thinks they have a disability, other people think they have a disability, and they actually have a disability. That's the 3-pronger. Okay, so then the manager's determining whether they're qualified and what accommodations are both reasonable and effective. So that's good. That's a good statement. What accommodations are both reasonable and effective in assisting an employee? Okay, I like that. That's good information. Now, here's a sign that Purdue concluded in doing their legal analysis of the ADA. They concluded putting one of these in the office would be a good idea. And they put one of these in most of their offices where they had people working. To make a request for a reasonable accommodation, please contact your human resources office. Now, I don't know why they didn't put on there to make a request for a reasonable disability accommodation. I think probably They didn't put that word on there because they didn't want people to become embarrassed. You know, what do you mean you're disabled? I didn't know you had that disability. Oh my God. You know, that kind of thing, that kind of reaction. So if you, what you see here, I would probably recommend as an attorney, this is not a bad idea. Maybe just put it on the bulletin board somewhere. If you don't have any employees, fine, don't worry about it. But if you do, you know, I would put it up. Okay. Now, the company's senior executives should work with managers if your company's large enough to have them. And if not, the company's senior executives should look around closely to spot potential Americans with disabilities issues and work through the interactive accommodation process. And there's a statement here I think is good. ADA might be implicated even if you think it isn't. If all of a sudden the employee starts raising issues of injury, illness, or medical condition that's affecting job performance. Or how about if they're gone a lot and maybe they're just not telling you why? Fibromyalgia or it's extreme migraine headaches or something along those lines. Okay. Or look at this third one. Employee is close to or has run out of all available paid leave. Well, you know, I don't know. A lot of my clients don't offer paid leave, but I guess you would just say excessive absences. It says essentially the same thing. And then here, if you get an employee who comes back to work and gives you a note and says, the doctor says you can do everything except this, and it has to do with something with vision or hearing or walking or use of arms or hands, carpal tunnel or whatever, or some permanent disability involving their hands, which they need in their job, you know, those should be red flags. And I think that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about red flags for managers, aren't we? That's what this is, red flags for managers. Okay, now here's a couple of examples. And, you know, I think that it's always good to talk through this. And then we're going to talk about how you make your company social media and websites compliant. Take this. Martha, a mortgage loan originator. And notice I used her exact NMLS title. I'm just going to throw a little SAFE Act guidance in here for all of you. Some of you guys call your mortgage loan originators all kinds of things. Senior loan officer, supreme commander of mortgage loans, reverse mortgage guru. I've seen it all. Let me tell you what the SAFE Act thinks and what the OFR thinks. What's on your license is what your title is. Now, you can call yourself the senior guru of mortgages, but you put that underneath mortgage loan originator. All right? MLO is what you are. Look at your license. Okay, there's only one class of mortgage loan originators that I'm aware of. All right, so she has fibromyalgia, and experiences flare-ups of major fatigue and pain affecting her ability to perform manual tasks, such as walking and daily household chores. She has requested a flexible work schedule and the ability to work from home, which would require the use of a computer and remote access. Okay, well, let's say she's a good employee, and I want to do my best to accommodate her. So the first test I do is I say, are these requests reasonable? And remember, when we talked about reasonable just means, are they fair? And can they make this person productive without impairing the company or costing the company too much money or some disadvantage? In other words, you don't always have to do something if it's going to hurt your company. Remember that. So are her requests reasonable? Yeah, that's what I just said. Probably they are. Absolutely. What if Martha was a cook and she worked at, let me think about that. How about that diner, Mel's Diner? You guys know where that is? Mel's Diner, it's out in Davie, I think. God, what a great place. What a great place. Well, let's say Martha's a line cook at Mel's Diner. How's she going to do that from home? She can't. Okay. And how about the flexible work schedule when every single day the line cook has to be there at certain specific hours because that's when people eat? So that would be an example of one that wouldn't be reasonable. All right, now let's look at this one. So we got Juan, he's a loan processor, and he recently lost most use of his right arm. So he tells his supervisor that performing certain office tasks take him much longer with his left hand. His supervisor replies that Juan still needs to meet deadlines. Okay, this is a good one. My initial lawyer feeling would be this. Supervisor shouldn't have done that. Supervisor probably should have asked, how can we help you? It would have been a better way to go about this. So, but the question here is, did Juan request an accommodation? He kind of did in a backdoor way. Do you guys think so? I think so. I think he kind of did. Oh, yep, there's your answer. So the answer is yes. That kind of a vague, kind of backdoor way of saying I need some help, we're supposed to accept that as a request for an accommodation. That's what the ADA says. Now, did the employer engage in the interactive process? Let's just click on it. It's going to say no. Yeah, that's what I just said. You know, any reasonable supervisor, and I know company owner would say, Juan, how can we help you? That'd be the first thing that would come out of my mouth and hopefully yours. Okay, does Juan have to meet the deadlines with or without a reasonable accommodation? Well, there's a good one. Because companies can't be harmed in the process of doing an accommodation, the answer here might be yes. And then he has a choice he has to make. Is this disparate treatment? Does they feel he's being discriminated against somehow because he's lost the use of his left hand? Or should he just go get another job? So I guess he's faced with some decisions. Let's see what the screen says. Yeah, that's okay. The screen says yes, if meeting deadlines is an essential function of his job. That's what I was just saying, wasn't it? So in other words, we don't have to go way out of our way, but the supervisor here should have sent him to HR to determine what reasonable accommodations could have assisted him. Okay? So it went full circle back to that old idea of how could I help you? Looking him in the eye and asking him the question. All righty. Now, how about privacy? When we talk about the Americans with Disabilities Act, we've got to think about medical information. It's got to be protected. It's just like everything else that has to do with Gramm-Leach-Bliley. It must be protected. Okay, it can't be shared with a supervisor. Accommodation information is only discussed on a need to know basis. Remember, this is a human being. Remember the respect thing on the very first slide we saw? This is a human being. So what we have to do is if they are given an accommodation, it's not something you put on the bulletin board because it could end up being embarrassing to that employee. And coworkers are not entitled to any medical information. You just can't talk about it. And human resources locks it up. Remember that? Remember the safeguards rule? This kind of goes right into the safeguards rule. That's where this applies. Now, let's look here. What do you do when you're interviewing people? This is a good one. Look at the second comment. You can ask them if they can perform job functions. But you can't say, what's your medical status? Tell me about your history. Are you disabled? Is that situation really so bad that it could affect your work? Just say, here are the job functions. Can you perform job functions? And then employees, no questions about medical status, medical history, family medical history, or specifics. And if you see something, you can tell employees you're concerned, but you can't discuss the issues with them unless you've got maybe the manager present and you involve HR. And for most of us with small businesses, we don't have an HR. So once again, that's the Orlando of your company. Okay? All right, there you go. Oh, look at this. Now we got to the Easter egg in this whole presentation. What about your clients? I think it's important to note, as I have repeated all along, that this particular law applies to them as well. And how does that affect you? I'm not even going to talk about the ramps outside, the big bathroom doors, the switches to open a door that's heavy, the fact that light switches might be put a little lower so a person who's disabled or in a wheelchair can access them, because that's not what was causing the lawsuits, okay? The issue in today's legal workplace is the websites and social media that you have. That's the issue. And why is that? I think you guys would know exactly what I mean if I said that's the low-hanging fruit. It's easy. And why is it easy? It's because 2 years ago, you couldn't find a website for a mortgage company anywhere on God's green earth that actually was legitimately handicap friendly. Now that's really changed. I think we've had a lot to do with that. In the fact that we've gone back after them hard and threatened to countersue the lawyers if they didn't back off. But the second part of that conversation was I made my clients do something to become compliant. And I'm going to show you exactly what that is in just a minute. All right, I got a comment here. What does that mean? Principally, visually or hearing impaired clients or potential clients must be accommodated. All the complaints I've seen haven't had anything to do with not getting up the wheelchair ramp. They've had to do with people logging in and not being able to see it or hear it. Okay? See it or hear it. Now, law firms, I already mentioned, they're looking for this and threatening brokers. I gave you a couple of examples. You guys probably know some of these people that sent money in and asked questions later. If you ever get anything like this, please, unless you really have money to burn, don't do it. Just send it over to me or your lawyer, whoever your attorney might be, and simply say, what does this mean and what should I do? All right, that's what we do, okay? And then I'm going to tell you, here's the solution that I think you can use, because this is the solution I started having all my clients use, and it worked. It's called the UserWay interface, UserWay. USERWAY, and there is a link here. I'm going to click on this, and God help me if it doesn't come back to the program, but let's just see. Oh, I'm kind of nervous about this. All right, here we go. All right, there's the UserWay site. Can you see that? Now, can't see it? Okay. All right, I screwed that up, I guess. New share? Yeah, okay, new share. Got it. Now can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, great. This is their website. And see, they've got a gentleman here sitting in a wheelchair at a computer, and this to give you the general idea. They have a free trial for you. And I'm going to tell you, they have a couple of different programs. They have one you pay for and one you don't. And you could actually be compliant with both of them because they both use what's called this WCAG 2.1 compliance, which is the latest state-of-the-art legal compliance for Americans with Disabilities Act on electronic media. I think if you wanted to get their super duper site, that's up to you. It's about $50 a month. You guys just do whatever you want. I don't have any business relationship with these people. I'm gonna give you the disclaimer. They don't send me 10 bucks out of every deal. So I have no financial interest here. This is just the best one I found. And you could start it off with a free trial and see how it works. Well, I want to show you how it works because I think this is really cool. Let's see if I can find the page that has, let's see, here you go. I have a broker up in Minnesota. Do you see this thing that says your home loan is waiting? You can see that? Okay, good. What this is basically is this is Jay Dacey. He's a client of mine for 4 years now. And he was one of the very first ones that got one of those letters, and he's a good guy. So what he did was he called me right away and said, hey, how do I solve this problem? And that's when I discovered the UserWay thing. So his website is like really nice, and he's got all the good stuff on here, like legal disclaimers, privacy policy, government disclosures. He's got a consent policy to pull credit, ADA accessibility statement. You can get into his NMLS site and check his license, and you see his numbers all over the place. This is a really good example of a compliant website. But over here, we got a little guy. Kind of looks like he's doing jumping jacks. See him there on the right-hand side? Can you guys see that okay? No? Orlando, can you see it?
No, I can't. I guess because all the pop-ups are on the way.
Oh, okay, but you're on the Jay Dacey mortgage team.
Yes, I
right?
see that.
Okay, I'm going to click on this. Watch what happens. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Now look at this, guys. This is a thing of beauty. This is beautiful. And I think this is the free version, frankly. And what it does is, let's say your guy comes in, your customer comes in, and they can't see clearly. They click on bigger text. Look what happens. See? See that? Everything's getting huge. It just keeps going. All right, now let me see if I can get rid of that now that I did it. I can't, I don't know how to fix it. All right, so I'm just going to close it and open it up again. There. Well, it's stuck. There is a way to just turn that around. I just don't know how to do it. You can see here, it'll change line height. Oh, here's reset. There you go. So we go back to the regular page. Dyslexia friendly. Okay, I haven't experimented with that one. Maybe one of you can try and let me know. I'm sure it probably works. Having it read to you is capable on here. And one of the things that's important is this accessibility statement. This is a requirement of the ADA. And what Jay did is Jay put it down here. Here it is. If I click on there, there it is. And see, it basically says, hey, look, people with disabilities are important to us, and we want to make sure we make everything as accessible as we possibly can. And then he's got comments about how many of the documents on his website are PDFs or Word docs or Excels, and you can use the Microsoft facility if you want to, and they'll make it more user friendly, or you could just use UserWay. And here's the disclaimer, and most importantly at the bottom, if this still doesn't work for you, please let us know, and we'll make every possible accommodation for you that we can. That's what that really means. That's the company saying to the customer, hey, we'll accommodate you. Let us know if this doesn't work. So you see how this works. There it is. It's opening up. Got it? That's pretty cool, isn't it? Bigger text, highlighting links, contrast, making the screen different so it's easier to read. See a person. Yeah, go ahead.
Is this the version that they pay the $50 a month, or is that their regular?
Frankly, I think this is the freebie.
This is the freebie. Okay.
I think this is the freebie, because let me tell you, the reason I say that is because it says free trial on the page, and I know that the other ones do more than this. And third, none of my clients have ever told me they ever got asked to pay anything. So that must mean something, don't you think? Mm-hmm. So I think your worst case is that you might have some kind of a fee, but you still have to be compliant. So maybe when you think about the cost of your website, you just kind of build into it $50 a month to cover ADA and get their full-blown version. Let me caution all of you that are in this class about just turning this over to your web guy and saying, here, I need a solution. What they'll do is they'll try to custom build you one, and they'll charge you $3,000 to $5,000. I've seen it 5 or 6 times. And there's no reason for you to do that. Absolutely no reason for you to do that, because they're going to give you bells and whistles that you don't need. This is directly written to comply with those standards, that WGH, whatever it was that I talked about. This is directly designed to comply with that standard. Okay, let me see if I can get back. I don't know how to do this, but let's see if I can get back to the screen. Yes, there we go. Hey, I finally learned how to use this. So anyway, we're on the last screen. I want to answer questions now because we're just about done. Anybody who has a question about this, ask Orlando and he'll give it to me. Let's do it. Come on, guys.
While we wait for that, Nelson, I had read an article that there was, I don't know if you know about it, but in Florida, there was some attorneys that they were reprimanded or censured because they were doing this. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was part of that, as a matter of fact. And we have several Florida brokers that were part of that. And that the information about these attorneys was sent to the Bar Association, and there were some legal problems with the way they were going about threatening people. And the Bar Association censored them. And that's why I would say for the last 6 to 9 months, we haven't really had this appear anywhere as a problem. But you see, here's the deal. That's fine, but it's still the law. And we were wrong in not complying with it. So they did do us a service by pointing out that we're supposed to make these electronic forms of product delivery compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So I thought, while you guys aren't getting threatening letters, and that's good for me because that's less work for me, which is good because I'm busy. Okay, so the reality is I'm okay with that. But it still pointed out something that we weren't doing that we needed to do. I can't think of even once where any time before this came up, anybody ever said anything to me about the Disability Act. Can you? Maybe only when I was remodeling an office. That was maybe the only time it ever came up. Do we have any questions?
Right now, we don't.
Okay. Well, if we don't, we have 24 people online. None of you have a question? It's okay. I'm all right with that. I can't be that good.
If there is no questions, I want to say thank you, Nelson. We really appreciate that, especially the ending part where people can go and this is obviously a problem. So reason why we had this webinar in the first place, because it's
Right.
come up several times. I'm sure that there's people here who know of people that have received that letter from an attorney. So, this is a very timely webinar. So I want to thank you for that. I also want to mention that we will be sending out a PowerPoint to all those who attended. Thank you to the members who showed up. If you're a non-member, this is just one of the many things that we do. We network, we advocate, and we educate. And this is one of those examples of how we educate. And it's for $99 a year to put into your association, the association that helps protect you and is working on your behalf. Nelson is a past president of FAMP. Linda, that was there before, was our current president. We work a lot, very hard to bring you timely information that can be used for us to advance in our careers and in our profession. So again, thank you, Nelson. I appreciate you coming on board. This was very great information. And thank you all for showing up.
Thanks,
Appreciate it.
everybody. And I'm honored that I was asked. And thanks. Call me if you need anything.
Thank you very
That's all
much.
I got. Bye-bye.